Thank you. Oh, that was close. Very close.
Do a little double dutch.
All right. Good morning. You know, Larry speaks of the traditions, and basically what he just did for me is he took me back to my childhood, because everything he described is what I experienced growing up going to church. And so that was a little trip down memory lane, but appreciate his words today. If you're here today or if you're watching online, please check in with us at fccmorris.org. Let us know you're here, and we're glad that you've joined us. There's a place there you can put your prayer concerns or any other things you want us to know about. We'd be glad to help you out. So please do that. Also, coming up, we have a mobile food pantry. If you still want to sign up, right underneath the TV right outside in the foyer on the right side. It's coming up on May 9th, just a week and a half away at 5 o'clock here in our parking lot. And then we have the ladies' tea on the left. You can sign up. That's coming up on May the 11th, ladies, at 10:30. Got a good response for both so far. We're very pleased with that and happy and looking forward to all of that. All right. Let's keep going on the kingdom. We're going to talk about the kingdom today again, and Jesus' teachings on the kingdom. And when I think about a kingdom, I think about, parts of a kingdom that get carved out. My part of the kingdom, your part of the kingdom, my own personal family kingdom, if you will, or the Zorn clan that is part of this world. And I can't remember where it was this week, but somewhere I had a conversation with somebody, and they were asking me, hey, do you know this certain, they gave me the lady's name, and well, her last name was Zorn. I thought you might be related or something. And I said, well, my dad and my grandpa always said, if you're a Zorn, we're all related because we're such a unique name, So, yeah, I've never met this lady before, never heard her name, but she's part of my kingdom. She's part of my clan. And, when you have your family and you give your name to your kids and then to the grandkids they go, you have certain expectations. You want your family to act a certain way, to think a certain way, to believe a certain way. You want them to be a certain way. And sometimes they turn out that certain way, and sometimes they don't, right? I mean, we all, the naivety of being a parent, right? Of having children and thinking to yourself, they're going to do exactly what I say every time I say it. So nobody has experienced that. Okay, well then I'm not alone. And if you're a parent, especially a new parent, feel encouraged today that everybody here is laughing at what I just said. That means you're in good company. We all struggle with that. We want our part of the kingdom to act and be a certain way, but it's not always going to be that way. Can you imagine God and all of his children, which is everybody in this room and everybody that's ever existed, and everybody that will exist, and everybody that is existing currently across the globe? How do you think he feels as the Heavenly Father of all these children on earth that he has created, in our willingness to obey, our willingness to follow the King of the kingdom, his son Jesus, our willingness to be under his lordship and rule, our willingness to be the kind of people that he wants us to be all the time? And I just wonder, God gives us children to give us a glimpse of what he feels like every single day. That's what God does. He gives us children to say, hey, this is going to teach you what it's like to be in my kingdom. And it's a very interesting concept. I always laugh at it because God must be more frustrated than any parent could ever be, But God's kingdom is so much greater than our personal little part of that world. And so it's where is God's kingdom? You get this concept that maybe it's in here, it's in a church building. And a lot of people think that our culture is taught or conditioned to think that way, that this is where God's kingdom's at. If you go into any church building across America, across the world, that's where God's kingdom is. And the truth of it is, yeah, that is where God's kingdom is, but it's much more than that. How big is God's kingdom? Well, I guess I ask this question. What did God create? And the answer is, not a trick question, yeah, everything. So I'm going to make the assumption that if God creates absolutely everything, then everything is his kingdom. It belongs to him. Everywhere is his kingdom. Everyone is part of his kingdom. Every, and fill in the blank, his kingdom. And I think we get lost in the old church language. I do it. Okay, I'm guilty of this too. But we get lost in the furthering God's kingdom, expanding God's kingdom, growing God's kingdom. And that's language that we've just kind of accustomed to hearing. But the truth is you can't do any of those things. You can't further it. You can't expand it. You can't grow it. It's already there. It already exists. What we can do is grow and expand and further obedience within his kingdom, and that's really what we're saying when we say those things. We want more obedience to the King. We want more obedience to Jesus. We want more people to follow him and his ways than the God of this world, Satan and his minions. And there is a spiritual battle that's going on between kingdoms. And sometimes people win that battle, sometimes they lose that battle. It all depends on their obedience. How will they obey? So from God's perspective, he created it all. It all belongs to him. The planets included, the galaxies, yes. Our Earth and our corner of that galaxy, sure, it's all his. So now that we cleared that up, maybe we might have grown up thinking that we've figured all this out, but it's not my feeling on it. When I began studying this kingdom concept fresh again, I came to this kingdom parable that Jesus teaches. It's one that many of us have heard, many of us know. It's the parable of the sower. And so you have the four pieces of soil that the sower, the farmer, throws the seed out to. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all include it as their launching point of Jesus' teaching ministry. And I think it's very important because if the first thing that Jesus teaches from the gospel's perspective is the parable of the sower, we should pay attention to it. We should look at what it means. We should figure it out, because that's going to be the most important thing that's going to drive all of his other teachings. And so let's dive off the high dive into the deep waters of this parable, if you would join me in this. And let's see what Jesus taught about kingdom. What does he teach? Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 9. Here's what is said. So Jesus is coming to, people are gathering around, he's teaching them, and he says that same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. That's kind of a cool way to teach. Get in a boat. I like this. Then he told them many things in parables, saying this: a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil, so it sprang up quickly, but because the soil was shallow, when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, they were withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear. So this is the first sermon Jesus preaches, really. He kind of comes out of the gate with this parable, this first teaching to the crowds. And this is on the sower. And the power of the kingdom is the power of good news. He said that constantly. The kingdom is near, the kingdom is at hand, good news is being preached. Good news is among you, I'm among you. He was buried. Jesus was raised from the dead to new life that no one could ever imagine. That's what he was preparing everybody for, the way he taught. So I think we need to dive into this parable to figure out what it is that he wants us to know about his kingdom, which, as we already established, is everything and everywhere. Absolutely everything and everywhere. Does this parable play that out? And it absolutely does. And so let's kind of walk through the nature of the parable. And the first nature I want you to catch is the universal nature of the parable. Notice that the seed goes out everywhere. Now the seed, let's kind of identify the seed in this parable. It is good news. The seed is good news. It goes everywhere. Jesus, his presence, everything about him, the story of him, God's redemption for the whole earth, everything is good news in Jesus. And so that seed is scattered everywhere. In fact, it's even kind of reckless, to be honest. It says the farmer just kind of like, whoop-de-doo, whoop. Now, I know our farmers, and I got my farmer up in the booth today doing the screens, and they don't do that anymore, do they? They don't just throw seed out there in the dirt and say, well, let's see what happens this year in Illinois. We got GPS systems that are guiding our combines that are getting close to now. If it would stop raining just a little bit, right? Anybody build an ark last night? It was coming down. Man, I didn't get much sleep. I kept hearing the thunder. Then I'd heard this incredible rain. Then my sump pump was going. I'm sure you guys had the same experience. And farmers just, they don't just willy-nilly just throw seed anywhere. The GPS, Jake, you know this too, it just moves exactly where it's supposed to go. The seeds go in the ground exactly where they're supposed to go. And it's almost automated. And my uncle is a farmer, and he's taught me a lot about what it means to farm these days. Seed goes everywhere in their field. But in this story, it's reckless. It's just throwing seeds up in the air, left and right. It's kind of like a wedding, you get the bird seed. You can't do that anymore, by the way. Hurts the birds. But back in the day when you threw bird seed at the bride and groom, right? How many of you got thrown bird seed at when you were a bride and groom? You remember those days? Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore, by the way. We do bubbles. We do all kinds of things. But we throw these seeds at people willy-nilly. We just throw them in the air. And that's the crazy part about this parable. It's just the farmer's like, yeah, I'm going to throw it over here. I'm going to throw it over there. Some goes on the hard ground. Some goes between the cracks. Some goes in the thorn bushes. Some goes on good ground. It all goes here and there and everywhere. And the whole point about it is it's universal. It's absolutely universal. No soil is missed. Not even the bad soils are missed. And what it's telling me is this: the kingdom is sown throughout every piece of creation. The good news about Jesus is in every piece of this world. Now, I have to scratch my head a little bit because I didn't grow up thinking that. Maybe you had the same problem I had, and that is this church building is where God lived. I had the problem growing up going to camp that I thought God lived at camp, at church camp. That's the only place that God could live was at church camp or church. But nowhere in between. Not on the highway, not in the city, not at the mall, certainly not at the mall, not at the sports stadiums, not at the universities, not at school and high school. No, God lived at camp, God lived at church. That's the only place God was. And we think that, I think, because, we're trained to think that way. Maybe inadvertently we are. And we have to retrain our brains. And the parable is going to teach us how to retrain the brain. The seed goes where? Everywhere. It's indiscriminate. It doesn't care what soil it's going to land on. In fact, the whole idea is that the good news of Jesus, it can be found everywhere you go, because if it's all God's kingdom, so goes Jesus. Jesus and the good news of Jesus is everywhere. Don't be surprised if you find the Holy Spirit confirming in your heart and in your soul and everything about you God's on the move doing something, and you're not in a church building, and you're not at a church camp, and you're not anywhere religious at all, and you feel like God's doing something in that place where you're at. Because God's good news kingdom is universal. It goes everywhere. It can be found everywhere. Sometimes it's hard to identify because the ground isn't right. Sometimes it's hard to see because it's under the surface and not at eye level. Sometimes the potential is there and you can see it and you want to see it, but it doesn't come out. Here's how we know it. In Romans chapter 1, verse 20, it says, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature has been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. You hear what the text is saying? You can go outside of a church building. You can go outside of anything religious at all and find God. His invisible qualities, his divine nature can be seen. Men and women have no excuse. None. You can go out, we just witnessed a couple of weeks back, the solar eclipse. That was a big deal. But when I witnessed that, I'm going, wow, God, how awesome is it that you have made this universe in such a way that when we have a solar eclipse, the moon and the size of the moon is exactly the size of the sun from our distance that we see on Earth, so that it's absolutely perfect. The circles absolutely match up. That's amazing. That, to me, was just one sign of many that tells me this was all made by God. God's fingerprints on all of it. The stars, everything that you see, it's universal. Now, you have to wrap your brain around that, because sometimes we think there's sacred space and non-sacred space. It's all sacred space. God created all of it, period. So that's the first thing we need to learn. It's a universal seed that goes everywhere. The second thing we learn is this: it's a mysterious nature. This is so kind of cool, but you simply don't see the seed in the ground. It's buried. The seed, the good news of Jesus, it's buried. It mysteriously creates something greater than what it was before going in the ground. Farmers, you're going to go put seed in the ground, hopefully very, very soon, if you haven't already. And you know what's going to happen, because we all live in the great state of what? Oh, you're so excited about that. Illinois, taxes. Well, I heard something like that, One of the things about Illinois you can say is we help feed the world. Throw Iowa in there, Nebraska, and boy, we got a feast going, right? We're going to watch. We all know this. Every year we know this. The problem with our brains is we take it for granted because we're so used to it. But those who are, I know people who have lived in New York. I know people who have lived in different states that come here, and they are enthralled by our rows of corn, our rows of beans. They just can't believe how awesome it looks. And I'm going, yeah, it's every day. What's the big deal? But that's our world. So we have seed going in the ground. You all can't see it, but you know what's coming, don't you? You know what's coming. Knee high by the 4th of July, that's old school. Now it's usually up to your eyeballs on the 4th of July, and we're moving even further if you get it in on time. And so we know the crops are coming. We know the seed's in the ground, but it's going to do something amazing. It's very mysterious, because whatever's going on in the dirt is transforming. Whatever's going on below ground is pretty amazing. Let me go back to Capen's book that I read to you last week, as he describes Jesus in this way. Because nothing happens in your spiritual life, in the kingdom, anywhere universal, until it gets buried first, until you die. Nothing happens until you're buried and dead. Look at what he says here. He, that is Jesus, as the Word of God, the seed, comes to his own. He becomes human, and his own people do not receive him. he is despised. He is the stone the builders rejected. He is ministered to, not in his own recognizable form, but in the sick and the imprisoned and the generally down and out. That's the least of these language. And to cap his whole career off, Jesus, as the word sown in the field of the world by the farmer, Jesus dies, he rises, and then he vanishes. His entire work proceeds as does the work of the seed. It takes place in a mystery, in secret, in a way that, as Luther once said, can neither be known nor felt. It can only be believed and trusted. Isn't that interesting? The work of Jesus is the work of the seed. It goes into the ground mysteriously, it dies, as Jesus went into the ground, was buried, and died. But it was doing its work all along. And when it's risen from the dead, when it pops up from the ground, everything changes. But it's that mystery that we got to hold on to. It's that mystery that you and I have to learn how to trust. I can't imagine the disciples, because when Jesus died, they kind of scattered to the four winds, just like the seed scattered. They just kind of went. They were scared. They crucified my rabbi. They crucified my Lord. They crucified the Messiah. That's not supposed to happen. But what God does is he takes the Messiah into the ground, into the dirt, and mysteriously that seed does an amazing work on the whole universe. It gives you and me a chance to live forever. It gives you and me a chance to have new bodies when we die, because God's going to reconstitute our bodies into something glorious and amazing in our resurrection, only because of what he's done in the dirt. It's mysterious. And then God, raises Jesus from the dead, lets him hang around for 40 days, teaches on the kingdom, which we're learning now, and then poof, he vanishes. He goes back to the right hand of the Father. And all that means is that we keep doing what he did. We keep dying to ourselves. We keep putting the good news into the ground so that it can come up something bigger and greater and more awesome than you can ever imagine. Resurrection does that. So here's the third thing about the kingdom. It's actual. It's actual. That means in all the soils that are mentioned in this parable, the seed actually does its work. It really does work. It's very amazing that it does the work. Some fell on hard ground, couldn't take root. It popped up, the sun scorched it, it's gone. But let me ask you, did the seed do its work? Yes. It was the other elements around it, or the soil, that wasn't ready for it to do its full work. How about the one that went into the thorns? It got thrown into the thorns. And it did its work. The seed went in the ground, and it came up. It actually came up as something. But all the thorns choked it out. The worries of life, which Jesus explains later, chokes it out. The third one's interesting. The bird. Dirty bird. The dirty bird comes and snatches the seed off the ground and takes it away. Now let me ask you something. Did it work? Did the seed work? I had to do a little study on this one. Here's what I know. Birds don't digest seeds. In one, and out the other. So they take the seed and basically deposit, let's call it deposit, okay? Let's be nice. You probably had bird stuff on your car before, and so it deposits the seed somewhere else. Guess what? The seed still actually works. It just has a little detour along the way there. But then the last one. You like that over there? I don't know. That's kind of weird. I know. I'm trying not to say, gross words in church. It's the good soil that the seed falls down into. And we know, based on the crop being 160 and 30 times what was put in, we know it worked. The good soil actually worked. And we can go in a lot of different directions there. But here's what I want you to know. It works. It works. The seed always works. You can trust it. The good news of Jesus always works. It's powerful. You can do whatever you want to it. It will work. That ought to give you a lot of confidence when you speak about Jesus in the future. You know it works. You know it's not going to fail. Which leads us to something that may cause us to think that it's going to fail, and that is the hostile nature of the parable. And the hostile nature is this. This is the fourth one I think we're covering here. There's always an enemy at work. When Jesus teaches about the kingdom throughout his teachings as he's walking around doing his ministry, there's an enemy at work. It's equally against the work of the seed. It's trying to halt the kingdom growth. It's trying to keep it from doing its thing, but it always does its thing. So in this parable, you have the birds, you have the thorns, you have the rocky ground, sometimes you have bad weather, sometimes you have sickness, sometimes you have abusive relationships, sometimes you have a financial setback, sometimes you have bad company that corrupts good character, sometimes it's a dead-end job or stress or mental illness. And the list goes on and on and on. There's always an enemy at work, a hostile nature that's trying to stop the kingdom doing what it's supposed to do in your life. Always. If you have a story to tell and your story is sad, join everybody else on planet Earth. We all have sad stories to tell. Because there's a hostile nature that's working against the seed. Now, I just got done telling you the seed's actually going to work, so you need to trust that in the middle of the hostility. You need to trust it when bad things are happening to you. You need to trust Jesus when nothing's going right. And I know that's hard because the enemy wants to come in and sow seeds of doubt, not kingdom. Sow seeds that will cause you to be depressed, to give up. Yeah, even in these circumstances, Jesus, his accomplishment on the cross, his accomplishment in the grave, especially his accomplishment in the resurrection, it is at work through your pain and my pain, through your suffering and my suffering, to bring about something greater than what was there before. See, the seed must die and be buried in order to produce something greater than what was buried. And so what is Jesus calling you and me to do? Die to self. Take up your cross. How often? Every day, daily. Take up your cross. Put yourself in the ground. Put yourself buried 6 feet under so that something greater can come up out of the ground when God does his work in you. Which leads to the final part of the parable, and that is our response. There's a response nature in all of us. We either fight it or we embrace it or we trust it or we don't, we doubt it, but our response is everything. That's the parable in a nutshell. Is how do we respond to all this? When the seed is good and the soil is good, and you mix the two together, there is real potential. And the real point of the parable is this: we are called upon to bear fruit. Bottom line, it's what we're called to do. When we trust Jesus, the seed that is buried, raised to new life, we are buried, raised, not just for resurrection's sake, but in order to bear fruit. The text says 30, 60, 100-fold. And you know what? I don't think God's very much concerned about what number it is. That's why he throws out 30, 60, 100. It doesn't matter. He wants us to have life in the Spirit. He wants us to produce fruit. Galatians 5 gives us the language that, there's no law against bearing as much fruit as you want to bear from the fruit of the Spirit. Keep on bearing it. That's what he wants from you and me. That's what he wants from everybody. And here's the thing, everybody has the potential to bear the fruit. Even your most pagan friend and coworker who has the most salacious life, who says the most incredible things, whose 4-letter words come flying out of their mouth, who's never really sober, just has this life that's totally out of control and spiraling downward. All those people, including yourself and your problems, all of it has potential to bear fruit. Everybody has potential to bear fruit. Why do I know this? Why am I confident in this? Because I believe the seed has already gone out to everything in the whole universe. I believe the good news of Jesus is already out there. It's a process of discovery. Now, some have discovered it. Some have discovered it and come and follow Jesus and love him and express that on a regular basis. Some just haven't discovered it yet. It's there. It's right under the surface. It's mysterious. It's working. Maybe they need help from some who have already experienced and discovered it. See, it's about trusting Jesus. Look at John 15, 1 through 8. Powerful verse. So if Jesus' first words in his teachings are, hey, here's the kingdom. It's everywhere, it's actual, it's powerful, you can be a part of it too. Here's what he says in his last words before he goes to the cross at the Last Supper. John 15, 1 through 8. I am the true vine, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of me that bears no fruit. And while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. That's the world we live in, folks. People trying to bear fruit by themselves. Not working. It must remain in the vine, he says. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, it'll be given to you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. What's the difference? The difference is some people in this world, I would like to think that I'm part of this group, and I'd like to think that everybody here is part of this group, have discovered the good news of Jesus. They discovered the seed is in the ground doing its thing, and we desire to bear fruit. We desire to be more peaceful, more loving, more kind, more gentle, more gooder. Sorry. My English is slipping. We desire all these things. Why? Because we've discovered the seed that's already there. And we want it to be a part of our lives, and we want to remain in the vine. We want to bear fruit. That's the goal for my family. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's the goal. It's the goal for grandkids I don't even know yet. Probably won't work out perfectly for them either, but it's the goal. The fruit, the expression of the attributes of the kingdom that shows the world what the seed looks like. And everybody has that opportunity. Most people just need God's people, us, to show them the potential of the seed, the power of the good news, not as something I have and you don't have. That's not it. It's something I have discovered, and I need to help you discover it as well, because it's right there. It's already been sown in all the world. Isn't it awesome to know that God and Jesus already buried good news in all of us? Just got to work the soil for better fruit production. Your life, my life, anybody's life. So our job is to go tell our friends what's already hidden just beneath the surface, just out of sight, and encourage them to trust it and then watch them grow. I got friends, you have friends. Their lives are a mess. It's sad. But I always tell them, hey, just one step away. Just got to trust somebody I know and I've trusted for most of my life. His name is Jesus. And I got a lot of reasons to trust him. And I want to share those reasons with you. And the thing is, it's right there for your taking. You can have it too. You don't have to travel to a religious place to find it. It's everywhere. Your job and my job as God's followers, as Christ's followers, is to encourage and help our friends and family and neighbors and coworkers, the people that we're around all the time, to encourage them to discover what we've already discovered. That is, Jesus is the seed of the kingdom. It's good news. We found it. We just need to help them find it too. Let's pray. God, help us to be kingdom people. To help those that we love, maybe even those that we're not too fond of, to find good news. It's not like it cannot be found. It can. It's there. Help us to expose it to people more and more often in the way we say things and do things and act and behave and talk. And give us opportunities, God, this week, even this week, to say what needs to be said and to show Jesus to everyone around us. In Jesus, we do pray. Amen. We've had awesome news. We've had 10 people respond to our teachings on baptism in the last couple weeks. And I just think that's great news. They're not all there yet. We're planning it. We're meeting with everybody. We're putting it on the calendar. And I have one for Mother's Day I'm excited about, and more to come. So I want you to rejoice in that. I want you to be excited about that. I want you to keep praying for that. And maybe that describes you. Maybe you're somebody who's been sitting on the fence a little bit saying, you know what, should I make that decision for Jesus? Should I be baptized into his name? Should I be obedient to him and follow him? If that's you, please come see me after church. Let's talk. Let's put this on the calendar. Let's move forward together.